I've already mentioned, I don't like refugee status as an initial thing to claim for North America. I don't know about Europe. I'm not an expert on Europe, so I'm not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
The main problem with refugee status is when you come in and you say, I want to make a claim for asylum in the United States, it's called asylum in the United States, or refugee status in Canada. They'll put put in front of you a document that says, basically says, I hereby agree to be allowed to be deported unless I prove my refugee claim. And it's on that basis that I'm getting conditional status in the USA or in Canada. It's conditional entry. But the danger is you're agreeing that if you can't prove that refugee claim, you're out, brother. And it's very seductive because they offer you, straight into a work permit and straight in Canada, at least into healthcare. So a lot of people think, well, like if I'm a visitor, I'm coming to the US, no work permit, no employment option, just I'm a visitor. So, the refugee claim sounds much better. But that condition is very serious because, and you may say, wow, what are you talking about? Semotiuk. They're explaining, they're running away from a war. There's a war going on. They're all refugees. All you have to say is you're Ukrainian and you're a refugee. You should be able to get a refugee claim through. No. It's purposefully defined very narrowly. For example, Syrians or others who were escaping war didn't necessarily right away get a permission to be called refugees. A refugee, by definition, the legality of it is that's a person who's A, outside their country of origin, B, has a well-founded fear of persecution, C, by their country of origin, by the government of the country of their origin, D, based on narrow criteria such as race, religion, political opinion, etc. And if the country has a part for, so let's take the case of Crimea, for example. When Crimea was invaded by the Russians, you think every Ukrainian should be able to get a refugee claim. No, because you could escape to another part of the country and claim, live in another part, a safe part of the country.
So if the Russian government is, if you qualify because under the legal terminology because of what the Russian government is doing to you, if you're Ukrainian, it doesn't count because it's not the Ukrainian government doing it to you.
Correct. That you're right on. Also, the fact that you travel through Poland to the United States or Canada could be argued against you. They could say, well, if you're a refugee, the typical refugee is someone who takes a canoe and canoes across the Atlantic Ocean and arrives exhausted on your shore with no clothes on. Not someone who flies over and for a visit to Canada or the United States. So they could argue, well, wait a minute, you had the chance to make a refugee claim in Poland. Why didn't you make it in Poland or Hungary or wherever you came from? And you're flying around Europe in airplanes, which some of them will be, because there's free air travel. Some Wizz Airlines, for example, is offering 100,000 free flights all over Europe.
Yeah.
So there are impediments to making the claim stick. And it's not Ukrainian as a group. That's not good enough. But if, let's say you're a gay and you're escaping, this is an example, it's not Ukraine, but it's a good example.
Sure.
If you're gay or a homosexual in Russia and you come to Canada or the United States and you claim refugee status, that's a good claim because they don't tolerate gays in Russia. That's an example of a good claim. So is your group being targeted? Now, if you're an officer in the Ukrainian army and now Russia has taken over the country, that's a good refugee claim. If you're a police officer, if you are a political leader like Zelensky and you come to the United States, that's going to be a good political refugee asylum claim. But if you're like you and me, we're just, well, lawyers are another example of someone that probably would succeed in a refugee claim. But if you're an average Joe, like we are otherwise, not so easy. So I'm leery about claiming refugee status at the border because of it's a trap. It's a trap. It's a last resort. But everybody thinks, oh, refugee claim right away. We're all refugees. But it's a decision of last resort. Only in the last resort would I do. Now,
that word carries a lot of legal weight, and if you put your weight on the wrong spot, the floorboards could fall from under you, I guess.
Let me give you an example of someone that I encountered recently. I'm not going to disclose the person's name or any identity, but the person had 7 children, young children, and his wife and children were in Poland, and he was trying to get the family over to Canada. Now the problem, his thinking was, that was pretty good thinking actually. If I get my family over to Canada, they'll have work permits, and they claim refugee status. They'll have work permit for my wife. There were 2 women there, by the way, mother or whatever. Plus B, all my children, there were 7 children, will go to school for free, and they'll all have health care. What could be better than that? That's way better than a visitor's, visa.
Yeah.
Okay, they would have work permits, but they wouldn't have all the rest of it. So now I argued against that for that family. I said, no, that's a bad move. That's a bad move. But then later I learned, wait a minute, this guy's not just any old Joe. This guy was a major economic leader in Ukraine. And he had spoken out against the Russians before the invasion. So I changed my mind. And in that case, I say, yeah, that's a good case, refugee claim in Canada. But the problem was, how do you get over to Canada? To get over to Canada, we can't say, hey, I'm a refugee, take me to Canada. Canada's not going to pay for a ticket to Canada for 7 people, 7 kids and 3 others. You have to pay the cost of a visitor's visa. You have to come over as a visitor and then make a refugee claim. And the problem with a visitor's visa is you have to pay for all the, a visitor's visa to the United States, by the way, you have to pay for it. It's not free. You have government fees. I can't remember how much. It's probably $300 or $400. But Canada said, Ukrainians will be exempt from having to pay the fees. So some people, Ukrainians, tried to file a visitor's claim only to find out, wait a minute, it says, pay your fee. How are you going to pay your fee? So we had to photocopy the website saying it's visa free, meaning no fee, and include that in it says, I am exempt from paying the fee. And then what's the basis of exemption? A copy of the website saying refugees can come for free. That's how they can get them over here. But this guy had another problem. The problem was he had no money outside the country. Now, how are you going to get the family, even now that it's free to apply for the visas, to Canada? The airfares. Did he have any family in Canada or friends? None. How are you going to get him over here? He had friends in the United States. Now he had 2 visas. The adults had visas, visitors visas to the United States, but they didn't have visitors visas to Canada. So I was arguing with them, you should go to the United States because you've got the visas. You go on a plane right now, go. The green light's there, go. But he said, well, what about my family? What about all the kids? And so there was, now it's still in the process. This case is not resolved yet. But I'm hoping what will happen is his American friends will collect the money necessary, or he'll find the money necessary to apply for the visitors visas to Canada and then make a refugee claim at the border of entry.